Hello everyone, this is Harshita Suresh and this is my 10th and final module on active and passive voice. About myself, I am studying BSc Electronic Media and I aspire to become a journalist and designer. I am an ardent grammar Nazi. I love sketching, painting, artwork, music, and I love binge watching television shows. So here is what we will finally be covering today. We're just going to recap the entire chapter. I have been recapping since the last module, so this is the part 2 of recap. Here are the answers to the previous exercise that we did on the last module. Convert the following sentences into active voice. Sentence number 1. The building was damaged by the fire. By what? The fire. So object should come to the subject's place and subject goes to the object. So the fire was damaged by the building. Does it make sense? So take away was, which is the auxiliary verb. So the fire damaged the building. The fire damaged the building. The minister was welcomed by the subjects. By what? By whom? The subject. Subject's object. Minister is the subject. So subject goes to the subject and the minister goes to the object. Was is dropped because it's an auxiliary verb. Welcomed by is dropped. So the subjects welcomed the minister. Third sentence, the letter was posted by Alice. By whom? Alice. Alice becomes the subject. Letter becomes the object. Was is dropped because it's auxiliary verb. So is by. So Alice posted the letter. Fourth sentence, by whom were you taught French? This is a question. This is slightly difficult or rather, advanced. So French, right? By whom were you taught French? By whom is your object, French is your subject. It's just differently placed, but you should understand, right? By is the preposition, you drop that, were, drop. Who taught you French? By whom were you taught French? Taught remains, you remains, French. Who taught you French? Simple. Sentence 5, we will be blamed by everyone. Everyone is the object, we will be the subject, will be blamed. It's in future, right? Be has to go because that's the auxiliary verb, so will by. Everyone will blame us. Everyone will blame we doesn't make sense, so we have to convert it into the closest thing that will sound right, that is everyone will blame us. So fine, let's dive into revising from where we left. So we're going to figure out when we're going to use active voice and when to use passive voice. So point number 1, active voice makes sentences stronger and have more precision. For example, the Banks Act of 1985 introduced new requirements to strengthen the banking system. To the point, precise, and it is very strong, right? Second point, active voice more closely resembles spoken language. When we speak, we generally use the active voice without thinking. So here is the example of a passive voice sentence. Tell me if you use it in your daily language. My car was driven to work by me. It sounds very formal and weird, right? Almost weird. So active voice of this same sentence is I drove my car to work. And this is something we would be using. So the second sentence seems to be easier while speaking. It comes to us naturally. And here is the other point. By eliminating the helping verb, that is the auxiliary verb, the active voice sentence generally uses fewer words to communicate the same old information. So in active voice, it's just as simple as Sita likes Geeta. But when you put it in passive voice, Geeta is liked by Sita. There's an extra preposition, there is an auxiliary verb. Geeta is liked by Sita. Now it's unnecessary and it usually passive voice is longer than the active voice for the same information, right? And again, it's simpler to say Sita likes Geeta. So when are we going to be using passive voice? When the actor is irrelevant. An experimental setup will be built by 2020. By whom? Irrelevant. The fact that an experimental setup will be built is the point of emphasis here. So the actor here is irrelevant. The actor is unknown. It is pretty similar to the first point. The cave paintings were made in the Upper Old Stone Age. By whom? Probably the people back then, a painter or the head of the tribe, we don't know. Actor is unknown. But the fact that the cave paintings are made in this particular stone age is the point of emphasis. Actor unknown. So when you want to be vague, mistakes are made. By whom, what mistakes, we don't know. It's very vague. We make mistakes is the active voice of this, but it tells us who made the mistakes. So if you don't want the whom part of it to be known, you can use passive voice to be vague as possible. Mistakes are made. Again, this point is similar to the previous one to bring out a general truth. Rules are meant to be broken. Now, the active voice to this will be I break rules or we break rules. But this gives a better touch. It is vague, it's a general truth, and people follow it, right? Because we all like breaking rules. So rules are meant to be broken. When you want to emphasize the person or thing acted upon, this is probably the main point. Insulin was discovered in 1921 by researchers at the University of Toronto. Now, what was discovered? That is our point of emphasis, insulin. By whom is secondary, right? Of course, they should get their credit. They should know. We should know which university they were in and who were they researchers. But the fact that insulin was discovered in 1921 is the most important thing. In fact, even 1921 is not that important. Insulin being discovered is the point of emphasis. So that's when we use passive voice. Now, when you're writing in a scientific genre that traditionally relies on passive voice, reports, scientific experiments, etc. For example, the sodium hydroxide was dissolved in water. This solution was then titrated with hydrochloric acid. Now, the active voice to the same thing would be we dissolve sodium hydroxide in water. Hydrochloric acid is then titrated with this solution. But it doesn't give our emphasis, right? In the scientific genre, while writing an experiment, the fact that sodium hydroxide has to be dissolved in water is the most important thing. Again, it's similar to the previous point. Now, there are some types of sentences that cannot be converted into passive voice. There is always an exception to everything in English, right? English is a very complicated language that way. So there are two important types wherein these sentences cannot be converted into passive voice. And the first thing is non-convertible tenses. Non-convertible tenses, these sentences of following tenses cannot be converted into passive voice. So there are 4 particular tenses. First one, the present perfect continuous tense, past perfect continuous tense, future perfect continuous tense, and future continuous tense. Now, if you want to know this more, I would suggest you go back to the previous modules, and I've given you examples for each of these tenses, and with these examples you would be able to understand better. Now, the other thing, sentences with intransitive verbs cannot be converted into passive. Now, what are intransitive or transitive verbs? There are 2 types of verbs, transitive and intransitive. Transitive verbs need an object in the sentence. Intransitive verbs don't need an object in the sentence. Very simple, but let me explain it a little more in detail. Transitive verbs. A verb that requires an object in the sentence to give a complete meaning. Requires an object in the sentence to give a complete meaning is known as transitive verbs. Let's take an example. He bought. He bought what? He bought is not a complete sentence. It does not give a complete idea. So he bought something. He bought a gift or he bought a book. There is an object in the sentence without which the verb buy or bought in the past tense is not going to make complete sense. Hence, bought or buy is a transitive verb. Next comes intransitive verbs. A verb which does not require an object in the sentence to give a complete meaning is known as intransitive verb. Does not require an object in the sentence to give a complete meaning. Example, he laughs, he sits, he cries. All these verbs, laugh, sit, cry, don't need an object to have a complete meaning. He laughs. At what is not the problem. But that is also there. You can add at what, but that still doesn't make it transitive. It still is intransitive. Intransitive verbs can be followed by a prepositional phrase, like at what in the previous slide, or an adverb to add to the thought being expressed, but they can never be followed by a noun which acts as the object of the sentence. Let me repeat, intransitive verbs can be followed by a prepositional phrase or an adverb to add to the thought being expressed, but they can never be followed by a noun which will probably act as the object of the sentence. For example, she grew up to be a teacher. She grew up to be a teacher. She grew up. Intransitive. Grow is an intransitive verb. Now the sentences having intransitive verbs cannot be converted into passive voice. Try, na? She grew up to be a teacher. Try converting it into passive. Now this is an active voice. Teacher grew up to be her. No, that doesn't make any sense, right? So you can't just convert an intransitive sentence, sentences with intransitive verbs into passive voice. The only reason is that this sentence has no object, sorry. This only reason is that the sentence has no object. So guys, it's been a beautiful, wonderful journey with you doing all the 10 modules. Please do rate, review, recommend and share. This is Harshita Suresh signing off for the last time in this module, active and passive voice. Thanks a lot.